This week on the agenda, fighting back against extreme weather. Just who is really leading the world in the battle against climate change? "2025 is once again predicted to be one of the hottest years on record. Climate change has seen high temperatures, drought conditions and forest fires flaring up across the globe. So as countries like the United States roll back on environmental laws, who is now taking charge of the fight to save the planet? Here with me now are Christine Low, Chief Development Strategist at the Institute for the Environment at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, and Arvea Marieni, Director of Ecological Transition Engineering Solutions at BeamCube and an EU Climate Pact Ambassador. Thanks so much for coming on the agenda. Christine, let me start with you, because turn on the news and we've got heat waves, droughts, wildfires, but also torrential rains, floods and devastating storms. Are extreme weather events becoming more frequent and intense?
I'm afraid the simple answer is yes. And, heat rises, it means the atmosphere is going to hold 7% more water for every 1 degree rise. That means there are going to be downpours. So the flooding that you're seeing, I'm afraid is going to continue. Storms are more extreme, meaning they are stronger. And also some places will have drought. And this kind of extreme weather, it's being predicted by climate scientists, and this is now settled science, unfortunately more extreme.
Arvea, and yet some major powers are scaling back their climate action or pushing back their net zero timelines, aren't they?
Well, there is the reality of the development of renewable energy, which is being scaled up at incredible pace and speed. And there is the reality of the industrial transformation. We are on the verge of a new industrial revolution, and it is being led by newcomers to the global markets. And this reality cannot be denied. Of course, actions by individual states and important economies, such as the United States, definitely have an impact on the pace of the transformation globally. But this revolution is well on the way, and this is led by economic factors. Renewable energies produce electricity at the lowest cost ever in human history, and this is an element that cannot be denied.
Christine, what about China? Because China spent more than twice as much on its green transition in 2023 than any other country. And 2/3 of the $2.1 trillion spent globally last year on everything from power grids to electric transport came from China. How would you say that China is leading the world in the energy transition?
Yes, I think the Chinese government always knew that they have to spend a lot. If we go back to 2020, that was when China made the commitment during a UN meeting that it would peak in 2030 and reach neutrality in 2060. Before that, they did the calculation that this was going to be about 2 and 2.5% of China GDP per year. So I think without government determination to do this, it's very hard to actually build out your renewable system. So I think we're seeing China doing, I know that in the news there's a lot of discussions about, overcapacity or whatever you want to call it. What China really has to do now is they've built capacity, and we've seen in the news that they've added so far just in half a year, like the total energy of Indonesia or Turkey, right? And by the end of the year, the Chinese is predicting that they'll double on solar still and maybe triple on wind. I mean, this is just a lot. They now need to tie it all together, not just build the capacity, but to actually consume the energy. So there's a lot still to happen, but without government's determination for policy consistency and to spend the money, you just can't really make this transition.
Arvea, you were talking about the transition and what you mentioned as a revolution taking place, but alongside government policies and targets, it's China who's investing heavily in renewable energy sources like solar, like wind power, as well as scaling up its electricity storage capacity. Is the rest of the world playing catch up?
The rest of the world, as different, is participating in the transition. First of all, we cannot deny that this revolution has been also seen the heavy contribution of, in terms of policy design and, so to say, paving the way from the European Union, which started already in the year 2000s, creating the market design conditions for this accelerated scale up. China's contribution has been massively in the acceleration of the manufacturing capability, which in turn has leveled the cost. The levelized cost of electricity production has gone down massively, almost 90% for solar photovoltaic, and this is due to China's capacity of scaling up manufacturing, which is funnily or ironically also a part of this overcapacity that we as Westerners at the moment are claiming China is using to blackmail us or to invade our markets. But this is basically the strength of China and its most important contribution to accelerating the uptake of renewables globally.
Christine, let's talk about battery technology, because that's another area where China seems to be powering ahead. And I wonder to what extent you think that China's sustainable development drive in tackling emission-cutting targets is making it easier for other countries.
Well, I think the main thing is, I'd like to think between Europe and China, we can do really some special deals. The thing about overcapacity is it really depends on what you're looking at. In terms of building out as quickly as you can and as cheaply as you can, if we were looking at building out renewables in the world, then China's overcapacity can be absorbed. So what are the financing deals or what are the policy deals that can be made where we can allow particularly poorer countries to actually build out their renewable energy? I think the EU and China are meeting, or they've just finished their meeting in Beijing. The one point of agreement seems to be climate change is something we can collaborate on. So I'd like to see really more specific things. And on batteries, this is very important because with renewables, of course, you generate energy at a time that you may not be using it. So how can that then be stored? The one point I also just want to add at this stage is, with AI, with the growth of data center and so on, this notion of energy security, people also think, oh gosh, we've miscalculated the new amount of energy, the added amount of energy we need for AI. So when we think about energy security from country to country, this becomes even more important. So that's why you're seeing China continuing to build out on capacity. And I think other countries have to think about what it is that they're going to do and whether they can cooperate in China to take the advantage of the very cheap renewable equipment that is now available.
Arvea, would you agree with that? That other countries need to now focus and think how they're going to respond to what China's doing? I wonder what incorporating that technology might mean too in terms of tackling extreme weather events, which are becoming much more worrying and with longer consequences.
Well, certainly I agree that there is a strategic interest which is undenied, and this has been persistent over the last decades between the European Union and China in general in terms of economic, environmental cooperation, and even the redesign of new models for markets. We are collectively moving towards a resource-efficient society, which is one of the key for approaching this resource-constrained world that we are going to face also as a consequence of climate change. I mean, China has started its transformation due to fundamentally internal resilience issues. They were aware that water would be a rare and scarce resource down the road. This is what is happening in the European Union. The other thing is that what other countries should do, we should co-design the rules of operation for this new economy, because we cannot run the markets and the trade of tomorrow on the basis of fossil fuel rules. And this means for the European Union and China to work on the rules-based system that has been the basis for prosperity, security, and reliance since the Second World War, which is today attacked. And this is a risk for everybody, especially if we need to challenge and manage together the commons that are not dependent on the behavior of a single state, or we will see an increase of wars and conflicts for fundamental resources such as water.
So, Christine, how do you see China and the EU co-designing a way to move forward, working together on the green transition?
Well, one thing that there's something that we can imagine, you know, as Riva said earlier, the EU, in a way, China have always looked to the EU to see what kind of new regulatory ideas that there could be, new market ideas, because the Europeans have really thought about this for really quite a long time. Now, as she said, the Chinese are very good at the supply chain of producing the equipment for it. The Chinese is also now working on how to redesign its own system for using renewables and using renewables much more efficiently. So I like to think, you know, this collaboration on both rolling out the equipment, helping not just Europe, but really the rest of the world, particularly the global south, to build out the equipment, to enable them to use and maintain the equipment, and to have this regulation for the new world that is much more low carbon is the way to go. Really, how can we get the politics out of the way enough, you know, so that the EU and China can work on this? But just to add one more point here, decarbonization, like this kind of collaboration, is really important. But the thing is, we started off the discussion with the extreme weather we're already having. So adaptation and resilience for all our communities, that's the expensive part, right? You know, the damage that is being caused. How can we also work together on that? That's what everybody is also thinking about at the same time.
Arvea, at that July meeting in Beijing, the EU also encouraged China to propose an ambitious plan for its emissions reductions up to 2035, to step up its international finance contributions and join a global methane pledge. What's the EU doing in those areas?
Well, first of all, there is a commitment to 42% production from renewables in the energy matrix of the European Union from now to 2030, which is down the road, and we are very well on track. The second point is the methane regulation, the first in the world that is actually monitoring and accounting for making suppliers accountable for the GHG, because it's not only CO2, this is, as China is recognizing and technically has always recognized, but politically it's making the step of integrating all the greenhouse gases, and a certain methane is one of the most dangerous at the time. So the methane regulation is going to make producers, especially of LNG and gas, accountable for their methane leaks, and that's fundamental. And this is something that we absolutely need to do together. And I do believe that the best way to collaborate is actually to create standards and accounting mechanisms that are common between these two policy areas, between two markets, common regulations for the products, for instance, energy efficiency or circularity standards that allows level playing field between the two producing areas, and also tackles and addresses this issue of relatively different cost matrix for the production, for instance, in China. Regarding overcapacity, I think that we should take a leaf of the Chinese Deng Xiaoping book and invite joint ventures from China to be established in the European Union, as it is already happening in part, like in Hungary, which is becoming a hub for EV production in Debrecen, or in other countries.
Christine, it's been a turbulent year for geopolitics as well as for extreme weather events. I wonder, are you concerned that turbulence in the geopolitical sphere will hinder the cooperation that's needed to fight climate change?
I'm extremely concerned. If we just go back a few years, we could see, during the Biden administration, for example, and, that time was not so easy between US and China. But because both countries, the leaders of both countries, believed that they have to deal with climate change, you had Xie Zhenhua and you had John Kerry on the other side representing the two countries. And, they were the climate chiefs for both countries. And they actually worked on various things to kind of keep going. Today, I'm afraid that we no longer have that capability between US and China. And so I think for Europe and China, that really is our hope, to see what can be done. But unfortunately, I think the geopolitics is also complicating EU and China relations on climate change.
Christine Lowe, Arvea, Marieni, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
We've been talking about record temperatures, heat waves and droughts. But climate change, of course, also causes extreme weather events like flash floods, like those seen recently in Beijing. One way scientists, architects and town planners are looking to protect urban spaces in the future is by developing so-called sponge cities. We can speak now to the man who invented the concept, Professor Kongjian, Dean of Peking University's College of Architecture and Landscape. Great to have you on the agenda again, because, we've talked about sponge cities before. So remind us what they are, because the starting point is they need to be somewhere where it rains a lot, don't they?
Okay, so sponge city is to use nature. It is a nature-based solution to retain water, to slow down water, and to embrace water, which is totally opposite to the conventional solution of climate adaptation, which means we use drainage pipe system, we build dams, we build seawalls, we build flood walls. Now these all depend on what we call gray infrastructure. Use a lot of concrete, but non-resilient. Because of climate change, so all those great infrastructure we built in the last 100 or 200 years will become obsolete, will all fail. So the nature-based solution means we use nature landscape, give water more space to make the ground, make the land permeable, to retain water and slow down water flow. And also when water accumulates, you need to be able to adapt to it, to embrace it. So that's a totally nature-based solution, and that is resilient.
So nature-based solutions with a little bit of technology as well. To talk us through the benefits to diversity, to building resilience to extreme weather, to air, to water quality.
Oh yes, of course. Nature-based, which means we make use of nature's ecosystem. So when you have concrete, you channelize the river, you damage the river, you build a reservoir, you build a seawall, you divide, you separate the biological process from the water, from the flood. But this sponge city idea is a holistic solution. We do use terracing the landscape with islanding, ponding, and low weirs, not high dams. And those are nature-based engineers. Those are engineers, technologists, and they are rooted in the history, in the long history of monsoon culture. For thousands of years, the peoples like in China, in Malaysia, Indonesia, we have this kind of wisdom, knowledge to adapt to this monsoon flood or monsoon climate. Now the climate change today is simply monsoon-like. Global-wise, it's monsoon-like, but it's nothing new for the monsoon culture. It's nothing new for the people in this monsoon region. Now that's why we should look back. How can we adapt nature to the climate change? So multiple benefit. So that's why it is holistic. If you can retain water, you will have biodiversity. You can recover the habitat. And if you have water in the city and in the ground, in the soil, you will cool off the temperature. If you have a sponge park, a sponge landscape in the city, in the middle of the city, our data shows that it can cool off 5 degrees or even 10 degrees of the temperature in the city. Yeah. So it is a holistic solution. It will reduce the temperature. It will reduce flood, and also it solves the problem of drought because the water, retained water will recharge the aquifer. And by the way, it is beautiful and certainly will recover the habitat, which means more biodiverse.
And China has been pioneering sponge cities, haven't they? Creating over 300 eco-cities and converting 30 cities into sponge cities for all the reasons you say, to address increasing flooding and drought.
Well, in China, we as I said, China is dominated by the monsoon climate. So climate change is here for a long time. But in the past 40 years, we developed fast, and we simply copy the early developed nations' infrastructure, like the drainage system, like the concrete channelizing the river, like build higher and higher dams. Now, those great infrastructure is not rooted in this kind of climate, in this monsoon climate. Now, that's why after 40 years or after 30 years, we know that most of the Chinese cities are now suffering monsoon flood because all this great infrastructure made of pipes, made of concrete, made of pumps, cannot simply adapt to this changing climate. Now that's why China found a new solution. I will say basically recover the culturally based, recover the indigenously a solution, which is sponge city. Now it become a national policy, because all the great infrastructure cannot adapt to this climate situation. Now that's why China you will have to say that we have to do it because it is a crisis. We have suffering the flood for the past 40, 30 years. And about 65% of the cities we build actually get flooded. Now that's why China may take lead in this field, use nature, use the sponge city as a national policy to solve the problem of urban inundation and urban flood.
It's a national policy in China, but how is China using its Belt and Road initiative to maybe expand this model of ecological and sustainable development into the broader global south?
Well, because global south, particularly in Southeast Asia, like India, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, you will see that all those are suffering monsoon flood, and they have the same problem. Now that's why we actually have some projects also in other parts of the world. In Thailand, for example, right in the middle of the city of Bangkok, we built a sponge park, and they take only 1 year to transform a brownfield into a permeable green oasis right in the middle of the city that cool off the city and also restores native habitat. And now you will see about 111 birds come back to the city, come back to the park. And also we have projects in other parts of the world. Right now we are being practicing in Vietnam, in India, and in Philippines, because all these cities, all these nations are suffering monsoon flood. And certainly you will see in other part of the southern globe, like Brazil, like Mexican cities. So all these cities have the same problem, which is the monsoon-like climate, basically climate change. And since global-wise, it is a problem now. So it's become a solution for other part of the world.
What are the challenges, though, for adapting this concept within well-established and quite dense urban areas where space is at a premium?
Well, the major challenge is actually the mentality. You have to change the mind. You have to change the mindset. You have to understand that any kind of early built great infrastructure will fail or already failed.
Yeah.
Are you going to keep investing in this kind of pipe or pumps or dams or dikes, or you could find a new revolutionary solution? Now that's why we have to change the mindset, a new knowledge, a new model, and a new solution, which is nature-based holistic solution. Well, you will see so the solution have three principles: retaining water, wherever water fall, try to keep as much possible as water try to retain the water as much as possible and make the ground permeable. So even in the very dense area, like in New York, like in London, like in Paris, you have plenty of space to retain the water. You can retain water on the roof. You can retain water in your backyard. You can retain water even in the sports ground, because make all these permeable and make all these places can handle water, because water is, when you hold water everywhere, you will basically solve the problem in larger scale.
How much is it going to cost, and how long is it going to take? You've mentioned in Bangkok it was just 1 year to create this park, but I wonder the time frame, how long it's going to take to really make cities more climate friendly.
Well, in Bangkok, it's a huge park right in the middle of the city. It takes only 1 year, to build. 18 months from design to build. So it's very easy, and we developed these technologies, which is based on the indigenous culture, indigenous knowledge about cut and fill. So we create a system, modularizes the process. So you can use only one machine, actually transform the brownfield into a green sponge. And it costs only $8 in the case of Bangkok, $8 per square meter. So it's very inexpensive, and it's easy working, and certainly it can be done anywhere. And cost-wise, based on our experience, to solve the same kind of problem, you can save 50% of budget.
Professor Yu Zhongyang, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You can watch every episode of The Agenda in full on CGTN Europe's YouTube channel. And for exclusive extra content from me, my guests and the rest of the team, don't forget to check out The Agenda Show on TikTok. Coming up on a future agenda. Controllers at the ready. We'll take a closer look at the multi-billion-dollar business of esports. But for now, from me, Juliet Mann, and from all the Agenda team here in London, goodbye.